Hello, everyone. I'm Tracy Bills. I'm a senior cybersecurity operations researcher at the CERT division of the Software Engineering Institute. Much of my current work is focused on assisting countries with the development of their national level cybersecurity incident management capabilities. I'm honored to be moderating this panel today on supply chain measures, how CERTs are reacting to recent hacks, because we will be talking about two of my favorite things: National Computer Security Incident Response Teams, or CERTs, and cyber threat information sharing. We have with us on today's panel, Bente Hoff, the director of the Norwegian National Cybersecurity Center. She has more than 20 years of experience from digitalization processes in cybersecurity, both in the private and public sectors. We also have Dan Cimpean, the general director of Romania's National CERT, CERT-RO. Dan is a member of the management board of the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity, a member of the governing board of the European Cybersecurity Industrial Technology and Research Competence Center, and he's also chairman of the governance board of the EU CEF Telecom Cybersecurity Program. Thank you both for joining us today. Perhaps we can start with each of you telling us a little bit more about your organization and its role in your country's cybersecurity ecosystem. Let's start with Dan.
Thank you so much, Tracy. I hope you can hear me properly. A few words about CERT Romania. So CERT Romania is the national cybersecurity authority in Romania. So our constituency is virtually everyone, the entire civilian cybersecurity stakeholders, governmental bodies, industry, academia, and so on. We have actually three hats at this moment. We play an national authority and regulatory role on cybersecurity. We are also single point of contact, national single point of contact for everything that is related to cybersecurity, whether policy or operational matters or cyber resilience in general and so on. And we also play, as the name says, the role of a computer emergency response team at national level. That's in a nutshell.
Thank you, Dan. Bente?
Yes, thank you. So I'm head of the Norwegian National Cybersecurity Center, which again is a part of the National Security Authority. And the National Security Authority works with both cybersecurity, but also other elements of security, physical security, for example. But my role and what I'm leading is the cybersecurity part of it. And that includes the national CERT, but it also includes the central body of knowledge for guidance materials, but also national requirements in the cybersecurity area. So we work a lot in the combination between CERT and incident handling and giving out the guidance, not only on the incident handling, but how Norwegian companies and the Norwegian society can build a resilience towards the threats. Yeah.
Thank you both for that insight. National CERTs have a broad spectrum of responsibilities, and they do vary from country to country, but most of them have the daunting task of being the central focal point for coordinating and facilitating the handling of incidents for their country. And they usually have a broader scope and a more diverse constituency as well than your average organizational incident response team. So it really serves as that operational arm within the country's cybersecurity ecosystem. From that viewpoint, what was your reaction to some of the recent prominent incidents such as the SolarWinds hack?
If you allow me, with your permission, to shoot first, I must say very honestly, we're very, very concerned, deeply concerned. It was at the moment when the news broke, so when everyone was kind of getting nervous, watching the notifications coming from United States, coming from researchers, from everyone that was looking into the matter. We had a bit of an emergency room full with people in my organization. We had, of course, to try to get actionable intelligence as soon as possible. And one very practical aspect that we faced, one very practical challenge, it was that it was extremely difficult to obtain immediately information from the supplier itself, because we are talking here about supply chain cybersecurity. The first experience we had in that case, it was absolutely impossible to contact directly the provider, the involved provider. So all the information, all the intelligence we had, it was via other national competent authorities from Cisa, from United States, and the information that was published by United States of America authorities. We are that concerned that we had to put in practice a plan at national level with some really standard procedures and actions on how to deal with similar situations in order to get the necessary assurance at national level on the magnitude of and the risk exposure that we had. So we basically did ourselves with our own resources in-depth, I will not call them scans because it's highly sensitive in Romania, vulnerability checks, let me call it like that, of the entire national range of IP addresses in order to systematically check one by one whether, for instance, servers, machines with those compromised components installed were exposed to internet. And we put since then the procedure in place, and we do it systematically for every major case of supply chain issue that is notified, it's reported globally.
Yes, if I can continue, I think I would start with sort of the background picture of this. We have over the last years seen an increase in the number of incidents or attacks, and but also the complexity of those. And but especially the last year, we've seen a huge increase in what we see of both numbers and complexity. And so that was a sort of background where we were when this happened. And when this came up, it was sort of not a surprise because it builds into the picture we've been seeing lately. And also supply chains is something we are really worried about. So it's, in that sense, it's not a surprise, but still we were really worried. And our focus was sort of on two main areas. One area is to get a situational overview of what's happening in Norway, but that also means that we need an understanding of what's happening globally. So that's one key area, and I can go into that later in this discussion. But the other area is our role as in Norway, and to provide information to both our national partners, international partners, to Norwegian government, but also to the public about what's happening. That's a really important part of our job. So both gathering information to understand the information, and then to do the information sharing in the right and fast enough way for everybody that needs the information is the two things we're focusing on in such a situation. And yeah, I think we can go back to several challenges with that later on.
Yes, thank you. And I think you've both touched on information sharing already and those partnerships. And national CERTs rely heavily on information sharing relationships and processes for effectively preventing and responding to incidents. Where did your organizations get information from regarding SolarWinds?
in the case of CERT-Romania, we got it through primarily, and this was the first moment when we get the info. It came via the Cisa network that is established in Europe, including a number of national or governmental CERTs. So that was a primary source of information, and immediately we got another set of info through the authorities in the United States.
We got information from a lot of different sources, but a different type of information. Because one thing is sort of from the starting point, there was a lot of information given out by US governmental agencies and also the security industry. Very fast came up with some information. And in addition, then we used our international partnerships with other CERTs and other national cybersecurity centers to get to get more information about this, and not only about the methods being used, but also to which extent had the different countries been hit by this, which also says something about the global situation. And then again, we have structures in our country. For example, we have a sectoral CERTs, one sector in each CERT, like you have for energy and you have for health and so on. So to get information from these CERTs inside Norway, what have they seen? Which companies have installed the software? To what consequences had it had? And then, because then the sectoral CERTs do some of the work, and we go in and both get an overview and help. So both the global information sharing and the national information sharing was very important. And we did also use information material, for example, from Cisa, when we informed Norwegian companies and the public. So that was really helpful.
I think it's very, very important to have a lot of those processes and relationships established before significant incident occurs. It really does help in the process. Dan, you touched on this a little bit in the beginning, but can you expand a little bit on what the coordination was like with industry partners?
Yeah, actually, what we realized, not only thanks to the supply chain cyber attacks, but we noted systematically in the past during other categories of attacks. What we realize here in Romania is that governmental bodies, governmental authorities on cybersecurity on their own, they cannot handle efficiently, effectively the phenomenon. So it's a fact that most of the competences, resources, tools, they stay with the industry, they stay with the businesses, part of them with academia, with researchers. So basically, one of our lessons learned was that we really, really need to leverage upon the entire ecosystem to work much closer, and not only to work as a regulator and a regulated body, to really establish a true, fair, open, and honest partnership with the key industry actors, and to communicate, avoid hiding the elephant, let me put it like that, in case of such incidents or issues, because we have to acknowledge most of the incidents that we note regarding the supply chain cyber attacks, whether they are related to update hijacking or code signing, or they are related to open source attacks, where attackers are inserting malware primarily into public open source repositories that are, as you may know, in Europe at least, they are one of the preferred source of code for public authorities. So we use those on large scale. So we realized that we really have to work much closer on dealing with the phenomenon with the industry itself. So the current mechanism that we have are clearly not sufficient. So we are working now very actively to put in place some more rapid mechanisms that will allow swift and sharp detection of the issues, swift and sharp response, and also better, let's say, intel in the hands of everyone, not only of the national authorities, but also in the hands of the industry itself, of the suppliers, but also of their entire base of clients. Because here it was an issue, and I want to share from the Romanian experience. After the solar winds, we realized that even weeks after everything was in the news, some organization didn't patch, didn't make the updates, didn't tackle the matter. So they were still exposed. Of course, they were comfortable because they were thinking we are not high-profile targets, we should not have an issue. Or in some cases, and that's what worried me a lot, they did not have the specific technical knowledge in order to understand what happened and to really take the right decision and the right technical steps included. They were so reliant on their supplier, technology supplier, that they couldn't address the issue themselves. So of course, some of them, they reached out to us and we guided them, but it's important to work all of us closer together, the industry supplier and their clients and the authorities, in order to make sure that no one is left uncovered and we can tackle very fast such issues if they pop up again.
Thank you.
Yes. Tracy, you mentioned earlier that it's necessary to have cooperation and routines and to know each other before something happens. And this is, I think, this public-private cooperation and a cooperation between agencies like ours and the industry to find good solutions for that is something all countries are focusing on, and I think it's something also all countries are partly succeeding and partly struggling with. What we have done in Norway is that 1.5 years ago, we, as a part of the National Cybersecurity Center, we invited around 40 Norwegian central important companies to be partners in the National Cybersecurity Center. That means to have access to parts of our offices, but also information and to have regular updates, and to also then be able to get together fast when something happens. And so this incident was one of those where we could use that mechanism. When that's said, we can't be really close to all Norwegian companies. It's not possible. So we need additional methods to reach out where it's necessary in each case. And so I think there's a lot of focus on cooperation with industry, and that also did help us in this case to get a situational overview. But this is an area where we have still got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, scalability for the national CERTs is definitely a challenge. We in our capacity building work, we are seeing a lot of the shift towards implementation of sector CERTs, or like in the US with ISACs and ISAOs, and they're definitely needed and valuable in situations like these because of that sector reach, especially if it's a sector specific incident that is occurring, or one that can easily cross sectors as well. Both of you mentioned that a lot of information initially came from the US Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA. What was your engagement like with CISA or other US government partners during these incidents?
I must honestly say that we did not work closely with the US authorities on this particular matter. So basically, at least for Romania, we are on the side of the consumers. We are just consumers of information that was sent not in a privileged way to us, but the information, the alerts, the analysis, and so on that was sent to all, I guess, all or almost all national governmental cyber authorities. So on this particular case, we did not work hands in hand, I mean, shoulder to shoulder with the US.
I think the picture is pretty much the same on our side. We do, yeah. Sometimes there is a sort of close cooperation on this, but quite often it's even closer between the European agencies, but we are following what Cisa is doing closely, and we are also sharing what we know when natural. So and it's important. So, but in this case, I think it was especially useful for us to sort of get information about what happened, but also the guidance material, because that came out very fast and sort of set a standard on how you communicate in this case with the different stages of compromise as well. So we follow the same terminology. I think that was also useful.
Yeah, sometimes I think it's similar to the sector discussion. Sometimes it's not possible for the national CERT to work closely or directly with all of the other national CERTs, but if there's a mechanism to get the information out to everyone, that is just as equally important, and with the extent of the analysis provided. So that's good information. Just a reminder for the audience members, if you have questions for the panelists, please submit them in the chat window, and we will try to get to them if we have time. I think you both touched on this earlier a little bit, but another ongoing challenge for information sharing efforts is ensuring that what entities are sharing is relevant, timely, and accurate. And those are always kind of the three areas that are challenging to balance, especially when you're in the midst of an incident or still conducting the analysis. I was listening to a webinar last week from a lot of the teams and companies that were working directly with SolarWinds and in the beginning and trying to determine exactly what was happening. And one of their goals was to get information out as fast as possible and timely, but they were also trying to balance that with not sending it too soon, wanting to make sure that they had enough analysis that people could act on. So I have two questions related to that. What are some of the current challenges your organization faces in regards to cyber threat information sharing? And how can we respond and coordinate better globally?
With your permission, I will shoot first. And you got it right, actually. We are all facing a bit of information overflow. Honestly, years ago, I remember our struggle was on how to get access to threat intelligence feeds, on how to get the data, how to get info that shall allow us to realize there is an attack or something happened and start from there. Now we are a bit, I choose carefully my words, we are a bit in a luxury situation that we have sensors and platforms and data feeds, etc. What we are, I would say, systematically lacking, it's enough capacity and capability on the technical side and on the human side, on the human resource side, to filter, process, structure, and out of all this pile of data, of data feeds, of information, to extract that actionable information data set that allow us not only to respond to one particular incident, to approach one particular supplier, but surprise, surprise, and we saw this after the SolarWinds lesson, that will allow us to handle and to protect and to help the entire supply chain, because this is what complicates as well the information and the entire problem. We succeed to analyze the data. Our analysts, they realize that they figure out what's going on, how it happened, what's the proper response, what has to be patched, or whatever technical solution has to be put in place. And we realized, and I speak for CERT Romania, we realized that sometimes we send this super actionable information to the wrong recipient. So we have to also match this information with the right recipient. When we talk about the entire supply chain, of course, we have to formulate, starting from one incident, from one data set, from one set of feeds, we have to formulate maybe 1, 2, 3, or more type of actionable recommendations or responses to everyone in the supply chain, because they were impacted in a different way by the same type of incident. So this complicates everything. And we realize for this particular case that we had to multiply by 2 or 3 the actual analysis effort, the technical response, the recommendation types, and to tailor for everyone in the supply chain. So I think aiming to do this with the same procedures, the same tools, the same staff level, it's childish. We have to change something. We have to change the paradigm, because that's the future of the attacks we are going to face, and we have to adapt ourselves as well. So for us, it's a continuous struggle. I don't have a silver bullet. I don't have a magic answer. We are scratching our heads, to be very honest, and trying with a bit of trial and error, trying to get the best solution, but it's still work in progress. We still have to do a lot of work to get it right.
Yes, again, I recognize a lot of what Dan is mentioning here, but I think I'll mention a couple of other areas to complement that. And what I think is we do, as Dan is saying, we do get a lot of information, and the information is not only technical, it's also even if we do get a lot more technical information than we did before, but we get information of all types. Some of it is classified, some is not, some is from international sources, some is from national sources, some is false alarms, some is, we get all this. And to take that and to be able to identify what are the important things that need action, and what are the important things that need us to inform nationally, or maybe just one Norwegian company, or and at what level. That is a huge job, and the expectations are also increasing. There's a sort of if you think about it, we have customers. The customers want more and more information, and they want it to be precise. And some years ago, I think most communication from us was at a more technical level than it is now. We're still sharing a lot of technical information, but at the same time as cybersecurity awareness has increased, and the importance of it has increased as well. We need to communicate to management, we need not only to communicate with people with IT knowledge, we have to communicate with the people looking after the contracts with the subcontractors. We need to communicate with a lot of different competence groups. And this requires a lot from us, because so now we have been hiring a lot of different people with different backgrounds and different communication skills, because this is sort of different ballgame than it used to be.
Yeah, you raise a good point that a lot of times when we think about the threat information sharing, a lot of the focus is on sort of that peer-to-peer level and looking at it from that technical perspective and the response aspect of it. But there are a lot of other parties that you have to be able to communicate the severity and other aspects of the information as well, and knowing which pieces of those to elevate, not to overwhelm the leadership as well with everything that is coming in and out. So that's definitely a good point. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat yet, so I will ask one more. With 5G and the increased implementation of Internet of Things, what are some of the things that your country is doing to address supply chain threats other than information sharing?
I will start for this. Actually, what we did in Romania, and it was closely related to two aspects. On one hand, it was about aligning with the position of other European Union member states with regards to 5G cybersecurity risks in general. It's what the European Union calls 5G toolbox, which is a set of guidelines that was shared with everyone. It's public information in order to guide countries on how to assess and how to think and how to reflect upon the 5G risk. So we did a lot of work in that direction. Another work that we did at national level was triggered directly by a memorandum of understanding between Romania and the United States of America with regards to 5G security in general. So doing these two pieces of work, and this happened through an intergovernmental work group where all key governmental bodies were represented. So everyone came in and contributed with experts around 5G, around 5G cybersecurity or supply chain cybersecurity and so on. So basically the first measure we took in Romania was that one 5G security law was adopted by the parliament. Now is with the president for sign off. Actually, sorry, it was signed 1 week ago. Now it's published, so has to produce effect, sorry. Basically, that particular law will create the legal basis to allow the authorities to look very, very carefully into the supply chain risk for the 5G technologies, to perform vetting of the technology providers and of their technologies with full identification of related cybersecurity risks, and not only, and lay the basis, the legal basis, to allow for a better transparency of whatever vulnerability risks related to this complex new technology are going to be put in place when implemented, when sold in our country. So it's quite a lot of work to be done. I must say the biggest challenge was, of course, expertise on the technology itself, because we all know the 5G experts are not with the governments. They are with the telecom operators, they are with the technology providers. So it's very important at country level, at governmental level, at industry level, in the broader sense, that we build very fast knowledge, expertise on 5G security aspects, on the technology itself. If you want to use it in a secure way, if you want to be able to audit it, to control it, to vet it, to test it, and so on. So we are still lacking, in my honest opinion, sufficient experts with deep knowledge on the technology itself in order to be able to roll out all the measures we want to roll out.
And despite those challenges, I find it interesting, though, that the security aspects and some of those processes are being thought about in advance or in the early stages of implementation, with a lot of things, especially related to Internet of Things, we find that security is kind of the afterthought, put it out there first, and then security is thought about later, and it's harder to implement the policies and processes to make that happen after the fact. So it's interesting that despite the lack of expertise, that at least there's some forethought there. So thank you, Bente.
Yes, this is also about value chain issues, right? That more and more we got this really long value chains. So any service or any company that depend on a lot of suppliers to provide the services, and this most often this is complex, and it's difficult to get an overview on. And this is something we had discussions on in Norway for several years now, and of course 5G issues has also been a part of it, but also on a broader level, it comes down to how is it possible for any company and on a national level to have an overview of those value chains and suppliers that are important for society, and what requirements should be put on those and to the suppliers. I would say that not many years ago, requirements on suppliers were mainly on sort of other services. When you bought something physical, the requirements were pretty clear, at least a lot more clear than it is on the in the digital world. So that's something we're seeing now more and more, that requirements, security requirements, when you buy something in a digital world, is something that's included in more clear, for example, in the National Cybersecurity Act and other regulations. I think that's something that's becoming more and more now, but it's still something that's not solved, and it also partly has to be solved globally. It's very difficult for each country to solve that.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, so I will ask one final question. If you could give one piece of advice to other national CERTs that are working to either establish or improve their information sharing processes, or to develop processes related to securing supply chains, what would it be?
Honestly, I will advise them to invest in people, to hire talent, because at this moment we really need fresh ideas, new colleagues that think out of the box, simply in order to be able to cope with the changes, with the challenges that we have. Of course, tools and licenses and technologies and infrastructure, these are great, and we must have them in place. But the real differentiator in order to tackle the problem will be new brains, new colleagues, fresh ideas, thinking out of the box, finding innovative ways that we never thought about in the last year or the last few years on how to work differently together. Because we have to change something in the way we share information, we collaborate at national level or cross borders, if we want to keep the speed and keep up with the evolution.
I think I would come back to what we discussed earlier, that to find structures and way to cooperate before something happens. We've been working, I mentioned that we've been working on that to build those structures with the private companies, but we also work to build those structures with the other agencies in Norway. but also internationally. And I think that has helped us a lot the last year. And as I said, we still got a way to go on that, absolutely. But it has helped, and to build those structures early and to practice as well. You could say that in the cyber world, there will always be enough of real cases. So if you just start working together, you will sort of be learn to work together as well. And I also think that now we had 1.5 years where we had done almost no traveling, and we found digital ways to work internationally, which is really good. But I also think that now when everything's opening up, I think it's important that international CERTs and others also travel. And we need to know each other also internationally to get this to work in the same way as you do nationally.
Thank you. Okay, we do have one question from the audience. So in Europe, what region are you experiencing the most cyber attacks from? And have there been many from the United States emanating from the US?
Let me speak for Romania. So because I get every single day the figures, so I know where from apparently originated the attack, because of course can be a false flag attack where infrastructure in country A is taken over in order to launch the attack. So it's not really with full attribution exercise done. But statistically, the apparent source of the attacks usually is China, Russia. There are once in a while, I mean, at least 2 times a week, European countries like Netherlands or Spain or Italy or Germany and so on. And also United States systematically pops up in the top 10. And I think is not abnormal because of the super large infrastructure that anyone can buy, can share based in the United States. So in a nutshell, China, Russia, some of the top attackers systematically in terms of number, magnitude, complexity of the attacks that we detect in particular with our own sensors, and the United States popping up systematically in top 10.
Yeah. The way we're organized in Norway is that the agency where I work, we sort of focus on the resilience part. And it doesn't mean that we don't see things like Dan is pinpointing, but it's not my role to comment on it. What I think I could say is that I would expect most European countries to have a similar picture.
Thank you. Okay, I think that was our only question from the chat. We have a couple more minutes if there is another question. And if not, I will ask Dan and Bente if you have any final words of wisdom you would like to share with the participants.
Yeah, maybe just some reflection from me. I truly believe we are now in the right business because we are not going to get bored for the next months and years. So it's so much happening and so much interesting evolution and so many initiatives. And for young professionals in particular, so many opportunities to grow, to develop, to do really cool and new things on the technology side, on the resilience side, on the policy side, that to be very honest, if I would be again at the beginning of my career, I will not hesitate and step into cybersecurity. That's a message I wanted to share. The only challenge and problem we don't have enough young talent to use because the demand is so high and the things are moving so fast that I'm afraid universities, colleges, they don't produce enough graduates to fill the demand.
I think that's an interesting start you have there, Dan. I think that the lack of skilled people and competence is the really big challenge. in Norway and also globally. And I think we need, there's, yeah, there will be a lot of jobs here, no doubt about that. And we need those that are really want to go deep into the technical stuff. But I also think it's an area where we need more and more people with other competence areas and qualifications. We need people who know cyber law. We need people who know how to communicate. We need people who know policy development. Now I'm talking about sort of my organization, but I think I'd talk about any organization that takes security seriously. Need all these roles.
Yes, thank you both. I agree with both of your comments on that matter, and especially when it comes to information sharing. And a lot of the roles found in national CERTs, they are very heavy on the soft skills such as communication and being able to develop relationships. So if you're not a highly technical person with some interest in cybersecurity, don't be afraid to explore some of these other options, because they're all needed. So we're at our time. So thank you, Bente and Dan, for discussing with us the unique and challenging responsibilities of your national CERTs, and really highlighting the need for strong transnational relationships in combating supply chain threats and other significant incidents. So thank you.
Thank you.